In this segment, I'd like to describe the target tense aspect mood rules, and you'll definitely want to use these rules as you develop your grammar. Before looking at these rules, we need to come back here to the feature adjustment rules, which I described in an earlier segment, and let's go to the collapse feature values option and select verb. And you see here for time, as I mentioned earlier, there are numerous levels of past tense and numerous levels of future tense. Before setting up your target tense aspect mood rules, you should come here and define the values of time that are relevant to your language, and then collapse all of these values to those relevant values. So if your language has, let's say, remote past or remote future, or various levels of future tense and various levels of past tense, you should define those here and then collapse these values to those values that are relevant to your language. I'm going to use the shortcut and just use past, present, and future. So now all of the various degrees of past tense have been collapsed to a new value called past, and all of the degrees of future tense have been collapsed to a new value called future, and timeless has been combined with present. And now we're ready to look at our target tense aspect mood rules. Here we see the exact same dialogue that we saw earlier when we looked at the styles of direct speech. This time we will use the values of time, aspect, and mood that are set in the semantic representations, and we'll use those values to create new values of target tense and form, target aspect, and target mood. These values will then be used in our subsequent rules down in our synthesizing grammar. Before we do this, we can specify the included features. So for example, you may want to include something like clause illocutionary force. You can specify whatever features are relevant, whatever features you want included, just like we mentioned in the styles of direct speech. And now here, we need to define the values that we want available in target tense and form. So I click on feature set, and we see the dialog that we've seen before. It shows us all of the syntactic categories, all of their features, and we're going to go to target tense and form. Now we're going to define the values that are relevant to our language. And I'm going to say, I'll make up a few values like past, present, future. Let's say bare stem infinitive, to infinitive, and participle. We can always come back and define more forms later. That's enough for now. Now, those forms that we just defined, those tenses and forms, are available in this drop-down. Now let's begin by setting up some very simple rules. If an event in the semantic representations is marked with a time value of past, we generally want target tense and form to be past. Let's activate that row. If an event in the semantic representations is marked with a time value of future, we generally want the target tense and form to also be future. And one more. If it's present, we want it to be present. Now at this point you're probably wondering, why are we doing this? But you'll see in a moment, okay? Right now we're here at clauses 175, which produces, if Mary reads that book, John will read this book. Now if we look at the events here, okay, the time value is future. The target tense and form value is also future because of that rule that we just wrote. If we rest our cursor here, we can see that originally the time was later today. So this is saying John will read this book later today if Mary, okay, this value is future. It was originally later today also. So this proposition is saying if Mary will read that book later today, then John will read this book later today. But generally in English, if it's an if clause, we just say if Mary reads that book, John will read this book. We don't put a future tense marker here. So now let's add a rule to our target tense aspect mood rules that says for if conditionals, if it's future tense, then make it present tense. Now we don't have a feature here called adverbial clause type. So we go to our included features, and you may recall that when we talked about our feature adjustment rules, one of the options is adding a rule that will create a feature called adverbial clause type. Now we have a column called adverbial clause type. And let's say add row. If our adverbial clause type is a conditional, and if the event is future tense, we want our target tense and form to be present tense. And we can add a comment, clauses 175. If Mary reads that book, John will read this book. Okay, now let's save that. Now these rules are also executed before we click the generate button. So now if we look here, if we look at target tense and form, it's been set to present. And we can look at the rules history. Originally target tense and form was unspecified, then it was changed to future by the transfer grammar tense aspect mood rules row 2. Then it was changed from future to present by transfer grammar tense aspect mood rules row 4. These rules are similar to the styles of direct speech rules in that they're executed from top to bottom. As soon as a particular row matches an event in the semantic representations, whatever features are specified in these three columns will be applied to that event. But then the subsequent rows are also executed, and if another row matches, then whatever features are specified over here, those features will be applied to that event. Now if we click our generate button now, and we see our grammar being executed, okay, John reads this book, Mary read, so we don't have any rules right now that are looking at our target tense and form. So let's go here to verbs. We have a group called tense from an earlier tutorial. Let's write a rule now. When a verb is marked as target tense and form is present, as you see in the middle of the pop-up, and person of subject is third and number of subject is singular, so this is third singular present, we want to select the third singular present form from the lexicon. So I'll double click there. This will be a form selection rule. So when the features are, now we want to use target tense and form. So if it's present, person of subject is third singular, then we want to select the third singular present tense form from the lexicon. Select the third singular present tense form from the lexicon. Let's give it a grammar topic. We'll say tense. Now if we generate the verse, Mary reads that book. If Mary reads that book, John will read this book. Let's add another rule that will add the auxiliary will when target tense and form is future. And again, we'll select tense. You've just entered a new constituent into verb phrases called tense auxiliary. Do you want to edit your first verb phrase structure rule? Let's say yes. There it is at the top. We'll leave it there. Click generate. Okay, if Mary reads that book, John will read this book. In this tutorial, we won't be concerned about positioning this preposition at the beginning of the adverbial clause and positioning the adverbial clause at the the beginning of the sentence, we've discussed those issues in other tutorials. And that concludes this segment.